Hi everyone, Heather here. Today I want to talk with you about a pathogen, in particular C. diff. Now C. diff is usually a hospital-acquired pathogenic bacteria that people come in contact with, whether they're admitted to the hospital, maybe they're just visiting someone in the hospital, maybe someone they're visiting has C. diff, maybe they've touched a food tray that someone else working in the hospital, a hospital staff member touched, and they came in contact with C. diff. Maybe you touched a bathroom or a drinking fountain in the hospital that was contaminated with C. diff. And these are all ways that that are most popular ways that you can acquire C. diff. Now, what's the big deal with it? Well, it can be really intense in the fact that it causes continuous diarrhea, abdominal cramping, abdominal pain, you're fatigued, you have no energy, brain fog. There's a lot of symptoms that come along with C. diff, and there's not very good treatment options out there for that at this time. Something that I like to utilize when it comes to C. diff is, first of all, we get the DNA GI map stool test to actually see if you have C. diff in your gut. And if it's in your gut, it's likely it's releasing cytotoxins, and those toxins are impacting your brain and your entire body. So it's really important to know if you have it and what level you have it at, and then we can make a plan to help remove C. diff from your body. Now, I utilize my radionics practice to help remove C. diff. It's really great to help that move on. It's much more effective and less harmful. It's not harmful at all. In fact, like the antibiotics that Western medicine prescribes for C. diff, and C. diff is an antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So taking antibiotics is simply going to push the disorder down further. It's not actually going to rectify the disorder. So if you have C. diff or any ailment for that matter, and you take antibiotics, it's not going to fully wipe that thing out, but what happens is it pushes the disorder down further and further and further in your body. And so then one day you get exposed to a toxin, maybe you continue to eat a poor diet, maybe you have a traumatic injury, maybe you have a big emotional breakdown or really emotional hardship in your life. What happens is those kind of things will trigger something else in your body, and you will have a healing response. So it can likely turn into things. If you've had C. diff, you may have some other disorder show up down the line when, triggered by poor diet or a trauma or an emotional trauma, or exposure to another pathogen, exposure to C. diff again. And what happens is it can show up in the same way, but it can also show up in a different way. It can show up as in an autoimmune condition. It can show up as in Alzheimer's. It can show up as in type 2 diabetes. It can show up as in cancer. And these are the things we don't really pay attention to when we're doing those rounds of antibiotics, and they can be helpful. They can definitely help, and save your life and be life-saving in some circumstances. However, after you've taken the antibiotic, it's incredibly important to do that GI map DNA stool test together with me so you can see what's actually in your gut and if it actually got all of the pathogen. And then from there, it's really important to make a plan as to how to really get that out, because you want to continue to address it even after you've taken things like antibiotics, because it's not fully out of your system. And what happens is it'll reemerge and cause a cascade of other health events down the line. So that's really important to just keep in mind. If you've taken antibiotics for anything, including possibly C. diff, know that it's likely still lingering in there, even if it's at small amounts, and that if it's those toxins that aren't removed, that it can cause some real cascade of health events later down the line. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, with regard to C. diff, it's known that if you, people who have low bile acids, people who have low bile, production, they tend to be more susceptible to C. diff. So if you're someone who's had a long-term vegetarian diet, if you're someone who doesn't have your gallbladder, if you're someone who has some sort of liver disease or sluggish liver, all of these things will impact the way your body and your liver produces bile, and your gallbladder uses that bile. And so one thing when it comes to C. diff, and that I incorporate into my treatment strategy with C. diff, is to really address the liver and the liver's ability to produce bile, the gallbladder's ability to release bile. And so if you are someone who has C. diff, your bile production is typically compromised, and that can be a way that creates a susceptibility for you attracting it, and it also makes it super challenging to allow that disorder, that bacteria, to move on until those bile acid levels are working healthily and up to par. So working with the bile is super important when it comes to addressing C. diff. That's something I do in my radionics practice, and through diet and through supplementation. All of these synergistically work together to help improve the bile production and to help to remove C. diff from the body from a really root level. So those are some things to keep in mind. People who are at risk for that, low bile production, as I mentioned there, vegetarians and vegans, long term, even if you're not currently, if you have been in the past for any prolonged period of time, your liver and bile production likely needs a little bit of encouragement and help to get back in the flow of producing bile, because bile is a huge digestive aid. We need it to break down fats. We need it to get the correct amount of pancreatic enzymes into our small intestine. It makes up the color of our stool. It's really important when it comes to the health and quality of our stool. And so it's really important to address your bile function, and that's huge when it comes to C. diff, and not only preventing it but helping to also rectify it as well. So that's a little bit about C. diff, and know that if you've had it or if you currently have it, there are other ways to approach it other than, Western medicine just gives antibiotics, and it's a pretty antibiotic resistant bacteria. And there needs to be other ways that you address C. diff that actually gets to the root of it and helps you to eliminate it through, easily out of your body, so you can be healthy again. Because if you have something like C. diff in your system, those probiotics that you're taking, the probiotic rich foods that you're eating, supplements that you're taking, they're not going to have any room to reside in your gut. They're not going to be able to form colonies and expand and grow, because that pathogen, C. diff, is taking up the space. And there's not going to be other space. They're going to compete with each other. And, the C. diff will win out every single time until it's removed, because that's just the nature of it and the dominance of it. And it's a really, it can be a very opportunistic pathogen that creates damage to the body. So what I do is we get the GI map, DNA stool tests, see what your levels of C. diff and other pathogens are. Then we make a treatment strategy to help remove those things easily and effectively from your body that doesn't cause your body harm and that doesn't further destroy your gut microbiome, which is the center of your health. So we do that via radionics and nutrition, supplementation, and very specific probiotics for you depending on what you need and what shows up on that stool test. So I hope you found this helpful. If you're someone suffering from C. diff, please feel free to reach out. Let's have a conversation about that, because there's a lot you can do to help actually rectify this from root places and help you start to feel better. And the antibiotics and the Western medicine route is really, really poor at that and doesn't get to the root of the issue. So feel free to reach out at ancestraldigestion.com or leave your comments below. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.